Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. I am available to deliver keynote presentations and workshops for your company or for your conference. Reach out to me, davedelaney.speaks.com, or email me and we can talk. Now on with the show.
Hey there, it's Jason with the Marketing Podcast Network. Real quick, I want to make sure you know that the world's leading B2B Marketing Expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center on March 21st and 22nd. It's high time we got back together to learn, see the latest technologies and solutions, and network, right? Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 250 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 300 exhibitors. And this year, your ticket also gets you into the Sales Innovation Expo and the Marketing and Advertising Expo. So it's like 3 conferences in one. It's March 21st and 22nd at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Go to b2bmarketingexpo.us to register. That's b2bmarketingexpo.us. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA.
Nice.
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 Nice. Nice.
Nice.
Nice.
Nice with Dave Delaney.
My guest today is Kris Kelso. Kris is a keynote speaker for leadership conferences, corporate events, and universities, and he's a frequent guest on television, radio, podcasts. Hey, podcasts like this one. And he's a trained and certified executive coach. And Kris is the author of Overcoming The Impostor, Silence Your Inner Critic, and Lead with Confidence. Welcome to the show, Kris.
Oh, thanks, Dave. I'm so glad to be here and I'm looking forward to this conversation a lot.
Yeah, me too. I've been excited about it. I love the book.
Thank you.
Left you a little review there on Amazon. It's a good book. I think it's a timely book for a lot of people too, especially as work has kind of changed. You know, more people are working from home and working under different conditions. So I think it's timely that way too. But I'm going to begin with a question. First of all, what is the nicest thing someone has done for you recently?
Wow. Well, someone left me a really nice review on Amazon for my book, and I appreciate that so much. We'll leave Dave nameless, but no, actually, around the book, so many people have been really encouraging with not only their own stories of how it has changed their thinking or impacted them, but sharing it with others. I think one of the best things that you can do for an author is to help perpetuate their work and pass it along to other people. And I've said, to many people that in order for this book to have the kind of impact I want it to have, it's got to get beyond my own circle of influence.
Yep.
And, the people that will buy it because they know me. And so there have been a number of people who've been very generous with their audiences, with their relationships, and recommending and referring it to others. So I'm always very, very appreciative of that.
Yeah, for sure. It's amazing as an author as well. It's amazing how a review just can help. It helps feed the algorithms like Amazon's, of course, which all authors are slaves to. But at the same time, just taking the time to share your book with people is a big deal. I mean, I even write about that in social media too, where I wrote something recently about using Twitter and how I don't want people to favorite my tweets. A retweet or a quote or whatever is better because that helps to spread it. And then replying is really, like, I'm a big proponent of social networking. And so I like replies. So rather than just liking or favoriting everything, that does give a little, nudge to the algorithms, but it's just a much nicer gesture to reply and leave a comment or share
Make it
with
a conversation.
Yeah, right.
Turn it into something more than just what it started with. I remember it was one of the late night hosts. I can't remember which one it was, but he pointed out that someone shared something on social media and they said, if you care about this cause, like this post, it's the least you can do. And he said, I think that actually is the least you can do.
My wife, Heather, and I always have this thing where, I'll do something for her or she'll do something for me. And we'll say I'll just say like, hey, thanks for helping me clean up, last night. And she'll just say, that it was literally the least I could do.
Yeah, right.
We always do
it.
It
Was absolutely. So the next notch down is nothing.
Right. It's just so, a retweet. How simple is that? What's a good conversation? Have you gotten into a good conversation on social media recently? What social network was it and what were you doing?
The good conversations are almost always around a thought-provoking question that I hadn't considered. Every now and then someone will ask something about my work or something I've spoken on or written about that is a new angle or just somewhere I haven't gone before. And those are the really intriguing ones. And the reason I think social media is probably a really good place for that kind of discussion is it gives me time to think. Since publishing this book, I've done a bunch of podcast interviews and I get a lot of the same questions. People are interested in a lot of the same things and talking about the themes of the book and the work. But every now and then someone will pose a question that I literally have just never considered or thought about before. And I have to say, well, you know what? You're going to have to give me a minute to think about that. and in a podcast or a live broadcast, a clubhouse room or something like that, it's difficult. You have to really think on your feet. But at least on social media, I can really take something like that and ponder it for a little while and really construct my thoughts before I formulate a response. But I think that gives you some really rich discussion and allows you to go in some different directions without having to just pop off a spontaneous answer that might not actually fully reflect how you think about it when you have some time.
So I'll get a little meta here then in an interview format and ask you what's a question that you've received that kind of tripped you up or made you pause to think about the answer on?
So I was on a podcast recently for that was around the tourism industry. Nicole Mahoney hosts a podcast called Destination on the Left, and she's kind of an expert on travel and tourism. And she had me on to talk about my book, and she said, the tourism industry sometimes can feel like an imposter among other industries because we don't get the same official recognition, whether it's by government entities or things like that other industries do as an economic as a major force in the economy. And yet empirically we know, Dave, that tourism is a big part of the economy, and especially in certain cities like Nashville where we live, it's a huge part of the economic it's a driving force in the economy. And so we went on this whole discussion about sort of imposter syndrome as it relates to industries and sectors rather than individuals. And that was a really interesting, I guess, intellectual exercise because my book is written about people and it's specific, it's unique individuals. It's about that mind game that goes on in your head of self-doubt. And I hadn't thought about applying that to such a broad audience or arena as an entire industry or business sector before, but it created a really unique discussion.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach to it for sure. Like thinking of it as an industry, like for example, and as you said, like in tourism, for example, or hospitality or something, where you feel that your industry may not be like as important as X, right, Y, and Z industries. And so you feel that, maybe like what was the feedback from her on like what challenges did she face as a result of being in that position to face imposter syndrome because she's in this, this industry that maybe in her mind, perhaps, or not her mind, but, she might feel that it's not as popular or seen as important, even though we all know it is.
Yeah. We talked about a lot of different ideas around how the industry can respond and sort of build its confidence, that it is a contributor and that it is a major factor, even when it's not getting the formal recognition or an example might be in the COVID pandemic, tourism wasn't necessarily deemed as an essential business. So a lot of tourism was just shut down and was not considered critical infrastructure or essential. And so, how does tourism respond? How does the industry, the hospitality industry, respond to we're not getting the same support and necessarily the same recognition as other industries, but we certainly have all seen and felt the economic effects of the lack of travel and tourism in our country and around the world. So, how you message that and how you come back and respond, I think is really interesting and telling about your industry. And then we also talked about even within that industry that, certain cities or destinations are always trying to compete with one another or emulate one another. And one of the messages in my book around imposter syndrome is that, when you're comparing yourself to someone else, it's never going to be a fair comparison. It's never going to be accurate. It's never going to be reliable as a benchmark of your real value and your purpose. And you've really got to focus on you are on your own journey. You're not on anyone else's journey. And as a city, you can't try to be another city. You have to focus on the unique aspects and the gifts and the benefits of your city, and not just try to emulate some other tourism area that you think you want to be like. And even in specific areas, neighborhoods or places that, you can learn from other things of what's going well in different areas, but just trying to be someone else or beat someone else at their game is usually not going to get you where you want to be. In fact, often it becomes a distraction that detracts from the things that are different and unique about your particular city. So there again, we took this idea of imposter syndrome in a whole different direction and applied it to the industry that she and her audience were in, and had a really engaging discussion that was a lot more mentally stimulating for me than just, talking about the typical stories that are in the book and the things that I've talked about, dozens and dozens of times. So It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Yeah. And I mean, and I think a lot about, living in Nashville for 14 years and kind of watching this city grow quite rapidly, and, having a background in the technology sector here, and knowing that, so often we're always trying to mimic or be the next Silicon Valley. And so to your point, let's focus less about trying to be like somewhere else and rather just be ourselves. And I think that's an important point. So talking about this little thing called the imposter syndrome, I'm not going to get into defining it, because I think if you are listening to this right now, you probably have faced imposter syndrome, so you are familiar with it at least. And if you haven't experienced it, well, we could talk about that too. But instead, let's talk about how imposter syndrome is a good thing, because you talked about it in your book that you are trying to silence your inner critic, but in order to lead with confidence, I think facing the imposter and understanding that the fact that you are dealing with this is actually a good thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think there's two reasons that you need to confront and deal with that inner critic rather than just avoid it or try to make it go away completely. And one is that if you're just trying to avoid it and just trying to eliminate it from your life, what it's going to do is cause you to avoid taking risks and avoid putting yourself in situations where you could fall short or you could experience failure. And if you avoid failure, you're going to put all kinds of artificial boundaries on yourself, on your life, on your career. And you're going to not be willing to take the risks that you need to take to learn, to grow, to stretch, and ultimately achieve the things that you want. So I've seen people try to avoid imposter syndrome by simply avoiding all the situations that may feed that imposter syndrome, or where they may feel like they're in over their head. And that just really, really limits and stifles your ability to grow and to develop. On the other hand, if you completely eradicate any self-doubt in your life, there's a real danger there too, because you can just become a narcissist, right? You can just become a person who believes that they're capable of anything at any time, and no matter what, they're always good enough and capable. There's no limits, no boundaries, and nothing, I can't fall short in any way. And that puts you at risk of making some really, really big mistakes that could be life-threatening or detrimental to others, or you're sort of putting yourself in harm's way, in the same way that a child who thinks they're a superhero, if left, completely unfettered, might try to jump off of a building and fly when they obviously cannot. So you want to have a healthy dose of self-doubt, but you want to really manage it and harness it. And one of the things that I learned in and really recognized in the process of writing this book, I was going back over my career and looking at all the different times that I've experienced self-doubt and imposter syndrome and felt like I was in over my head. And I realized that the moments that I was the most insecure, the times that I felt like I was, that I was really in over my head and at risk somewhere, those were often the most pivotal moments of my career. They were the times when great things were happening. I was learning, I was stretching, I was with people who may have intimidated me, but also had a lot to teach me and from whom I could really grow a lot faster than if I was just among, other peers or people where I felt like I was on par. And so I've learned to recognize that feeling of I may be a little bit in over my head as a really good sign, as a positive sign that there's opportunity here. Something to learn. There's an opportunity for me to grow. I'm experimenting. I'm stretching myself. And that's where the magic happens. It happens outside of your comfort zone. So while you don't want to avoid imposter syndrome, you also don't want to completely eliminate it where there is no self-doubt. You want to find that sweet spot where the doubts come, but they don't dominate you. You actually change your perspective and turn those into signs of great opportunity, and you lean into those moments despite the fear, rather than because it doesn't exist.
Do you think it's I'm just thinking about this in my own work, and working on a second book, and realize, and struggling with self-doubt in the process of writing my next book, and I'm continuously talking myself out of it by saying, you idiot, like you felt this way with the first book and it was acclaimed and people loved it. So,
right.
Shut up, Dave. Like you can do this because you've done it before. So do you think one of the remedies, and I'm not saying a remedy for destabilizing self-doubt, feelings would be experience?
Well, there certainly is a time when you have so much experience that you're just really comfortable with doing something, and it's old hat, it's very natural, and you do it with ease. So I think experience does play a factor and helps you to overcome imposter syndrome in a particular area of your life. But that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of experience, right? So if you have imposter syndrome writing a book and you do it anyway, well, then you've learned that you can overcome that imposter syndrome to write a book. And so the next time you write a book, you may still experience it. You may still have some self-doubt, but you can rely on that past experience to push through it. And it becomes a little bit easier that next time.
Right.
Because you can, as you just said, you can talk to yourself and say, look, I've been through this before and it worked out and I can do it. If you've written 12 books, then you may not have much imposter syndrome at all. You may feel like, man, this is something that I'm very comfortable. I'm in a groove. I know exactly how this is going to go. Really, imposter syndrome, the underlying root of it is the fear of failure and the fear of public exposure, as you're not what everyone thinks you are, or you're not what maybe you've pretended to be. And so even writing a second or third book, you can have that feeling of, well, maybe the first two were just a fluke. Maybe some luck played into those and my luck's going to run out. Even author Maya Angelou, after writing, I think, 10 or 11 books, She said, every time I publish a book, I think this is the one. This is when they're going to figure out that I really don't know what I'm doing, and that I've been running a game on everybody this whole time. And so, that imposter syndrome can continue to creep up on you and to plague you even after you have some experience. But again, I think the key is you learn to harness that energy, that feeling, and turn it into something positive. Make it a motivating force. Use it as a sign and a symbol that I'm doing the right thing, because when that doesn't show up anymore, that means I'm no longer stretching myself. I'm no longer doing anything that scares me. And so maybe I'm not doing things that are worth doing anymore.
So at what point do you realize, where is the fine line, or I'm sure there's a fine line, but where is that fine line for those who really, their brains are telling them it's a bad idea that you try this, right? Which is kind of, that is in a way imposter syndrome. Your brain's kind of kicking your heart in a way. But at what point do you have to acknowledge that, wait a minute, I don't know how to fly a plane. I need to get out of this cockpit right away.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. I think you have to look at the potential consequences of failure or falling short or making a mistake.
Yeah.
Because most of the time imposter syndrome it's mostly about the fear of embarrassment, right? It's if I fail, people are going to look at me and say, oh, he wasn't what he thought he was. But is there really a lot of harm in that? No, it's feelings, right? We're worried about our feelings being hurt. We're worried about maybe our credibility or our ability to continue to make money in the profession we're in or something. So there's maybe some real consequences there that have a little bit of teeth, but no one's going to get killed. No one's going to die. Now, should I scrub up and put on a doctor's outfit and walk into a surgical room and say, I'm a doctor? No, I shouldn't do that. Should I get in a cockpit of a plane when I've had no lessons and say, boy, I just really believe in myself and therefore I can fly this thing? No, because there's real and significant harm that can come if you try that and fail it. But if you write a book and it flops, the harm is going to be far outweighed by the value of what you learn in that process. And that's really a key, is changing your perspective on failure, that failure is learning. And if you decide that no matter what happens, you're either going to succeed or you're going to learn something at the very least, then failure truly becomes not an option. We're not going to fail. We're going to succeed at what we attempt to do, or we're going to fall short and we're going to learn a lot of things in the process. And when you have that attitude and that approach, a lot of these risks don't seem quite as risky, because you may not get out of it what you intended, but you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah, I love that. So what you're saying is really, it's about perspective in a way, right? It's about looking at what ultimately will happen if I fail at whatever it is that I'm attempting. So as you said, is someone going to die if I attempt surgery when I don't know what I'm doing? Actually, that reminds me, there's a great, I'm a, diehard Kids in the Hall fan from back in the day. And there's a great Dave Foley sketch where he plays the world's worst surgeon, where he doesn't actually know what he's doing. And at the very end of the sketch, he's like, "Oh, I got to go tell this family that he didn't make it." Yeah. I think, so it's great, but yeah, no, it's a good point, because we really should be looking at that perspective of what the ultimate outcome will be should failure come. And
balancing that with the opportunity again to learn.
Yeah.
Most of my learning has come at the expense of failure, right? We often learn more from failure than we do from success, quite frankly. Things go well and we don't evaluate it to really recognize why. But when things go wrong, we scrutinize, we dig in, and we learn and we apply and we change what we're doing. And so failure is an important part of the process. And again, if you avoid failure, you're going to avoid all kinds of learning as well. That's going to help you along the way, along life's journey, along your career.
Yeah, that's great. I have a keynote presentation that I do in a training called the Master Communicator's Secret Weapon. And in that talk, there's 3 key takeaways. And one of those is not fearing failure, and how I use examples in that talk of different companies and businesses who have pivoted, taking a risk, but pivoting and becoming something entirely, or not necessarily entirely, but somewhat different. Like, Nintendo switching from cards to technology. Well, that worked out pretty good. Or Starbucks, pivoting from just coffee grounds and espresso machines and things like that to, the Starbucks we all know and love now. So I mean, there's a lot of opportunity by facing those risks. And really, I think, as you said, like putting in perspective and thinking about what is the ultimate failure here, should failure strike. So that's great. Can you have imposter syndrome in an actual relationship?
Now, see, there's one of those interesting questions that I haven't thought about. In a relationship.
Hey, you're listening to the Nice Podcast with Dave Delaney. That's me. Visit Futureforth.com to learn how we can transform the communication at your organization. And if you need a speaker for your next online event or your in-person conference, are we doing in-person conferences yet? Soon, I hope. You can visit DaveDelaneySpeaks.com and you'll learn more about working with me there. All right, let's get back to the show.
I think so. I think that, imposter syndrome is when you doubt your success despite evidence to the contrary. So if you're in a relationship with someone, and whether that's a romantic relationship or a business relationship or just a friendship, if you worry that you're not really what the person thinks you are, or you feel like, man, things are going really, really well, but it must be a fluke. It must be the result of just luck and timing. And, maybe I just haven't said the really stupid thing that I'm eventually going to say that's going to blow this up. You can feel like maybe you're a little bit of a fraud in that relationship. And the question, I guess, would be, you have to take a real look at yourself and say, am I truly being inauthentic, or am I just suffering from an insecurity? Am I worried about something that could happen, or am I worried about the fact that I'm managing my image and I actually am wearing a mask, and at some point that mask is going to fall off? Those are 2 very different things. And most people who struggle with imposter syndrome are not frauds. They're not inauthentic. They're not faking. They worry that what other people see in them is not really there. And so I think that comes down to, particularly in the relationship area, it comes down to whether you're being genuine and honest, or whether you're being intentionally deceptive. And if you're not being intentionally deceptive, then that's just self-doubt. That's just insecurity creeping up. And you may need to even have an honest conversation about that with the person that you're in a relationship with, and talk about those feelings, and when and how they come up, and how you can, counteract those feelings and reframe your relationship and how you see it from a different perspective, so that you can have the confidence that you need there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Good job. Well, there you go. A new question for you. I wanted to keep it interesting, right?
I will put that one away and make sure to hold on to that answer in case it comes up again, because that was an interesting one.
Great. So, you have been a keynote speaker for some time, and I know that we are both huge fans of both Michael and Amy Port and HPS for public speaking. Talk a little bit about your experiences as a speaker and in what you have done as far as, learning performance and things like that. Because did you have any performance background? I can't remember if you have or not.
I don't have a performance background. So I have been speaking in front of audiences in one way or another since I was a teenager. And I've done a little bit of acting. I've done a little bit of performance when I was younger. And I was in radio in my late teenage years and things like that. But I've never been really formally trained. And up until just a few years ago, had never monetize speaking, had never been paid as a speaker. I just did it because I genuinely enjoy doing it. But a few years back, I started actually getting paid to speak and being hired to come in to companies or conferences and events and speak. And then, as you said, and actually it was you who introduced me to Michael and Amy Port and Heroic Public Speaking. And about a year ago now, I went through their initial core program and was just really blown away at the level of professionalism and quality that they displayed, and the things that I learned there were just an entire level above anything that I was doing. So I felt like I went in feeling like I was a pretty good speaker, and I came out feeling like I was sort of the best of the worst, like I was on the top of the amateur heap, and just at the very bottom rung of the professional group. So that's been such a fun journey over the last year, working with them and honing my craft and learning that skill. And I would still say I'm early as a professional speaker, but I'm definitely building and working those muscles and honing that craft, and will continue to do so. Because I think communication in general has always been an interest and a focus of mine. Because as skills go, I think communication skills are one of the most valuable. If you can be an effective communicator in any arena, whether it's on a stage or in front of an audience or on a microphone or not, the ability to communicate effectively, to help people see a perspective differently, or to understand a thought, or to just translate what's in my head into your head effectively is such a powerful tool, and not enough people know how to do it well, that it can really make you stand out when you're a great communicator.
Do you think that self-doubt can kick in when somebody is unable to effectively communicate what they're trying to communicate?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you have trouble communicating, you have an idea in your head, you have a thought, you have a concept that you want to convey. And when you can't get it across to other people, or when you think you're getting it across, but they don't respond well, they don't latch onto it, they don't react in the way you think, it's going to plant doubts in your head of whether the idea is even any good, or whether you see the situation correctly. And so an inability to communicate can not only hamper your ideas from spreading, or your perspective, your viewpoint from being shared by others, but it can cause you to even doubt that there's any value there, because it's not shared by others, because it's not spreading, because it's not coming across and being received and internalized by other people. So I really do. And I think that's a really great point, Dave, that you can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't communicate it effectively, you may eventually give up, just thinking, it must not be any good. Or right. I just must not be very smart, because none of the stuff that I come up with, people really latch onto. None of the stuff that I write really, goes viral and takes off like wildfire. Or when I speak to audiences, they just don't seem to get engaged and resonate. And so there's a difference between the quality and the value of the content or the ideas, and the delivery of it, the communication, whether it's written or performed or verbal, or in any other form, the mechanism you use to convey that information has to be as good as the information itself, or you're just going to dilute that value. And then, as you pointed out, that can result in imposter syndrome, on just feeling like maybe I really don't have anything to offer because it's just not happening for me. Mm.
Yeah, I remember Alan Alda, who we're both old enough to know. Some of our younger listeners may not be familiar. MASH. Come on, people. Anyway, but Alan Alda does a lot of work with the science community. He was a host of a program about that. But anyway, he wrote a book about. It's a great book. It's called "If I Understand You, Would I Have This Look on My Face?" And it's a great name for a book.
Yes,
but he
it
talks
is.
about how his specialty and what he's talking about now is improving the way that scientists communicate specifically. Because to your point, like if they cannot effectively communicate the urgency and you know what they're talking about, whether it's climate change or the next pandemic, if they can't effectively communicate this, then people will not understand what they're saying and thus not act upon it. So I guess that gets back to self-doubt and also asking yourself, or the imposter, but asking yourself, what is the ultimate outcome? Should I not be able to do what I need to do here? Like, are people going to die? Climate change? Yes, people are going to die. Pandemic? People are going to die. So it is absolutely crucial that you communicate effectively. So yeah, that's interesting. And
I met a guy named Mark Bayer. I think he's also a heroic public speaking alum, if I remember correctly. And he is in the science community, and he has a podcast called When Science Speaks. And that is basically his mission. Is he feels like scientists are, great at studying, at researching, and at coming up with ideas, and often terrible at communicating them. And so they need to get better at the communication side in order for their ideas to take hold. And of course, that's a skill that some people are always going to struggle to develop. Some people are naturally better at it than others. And there are times when one person, comes up with the idea and another person does the effective communication of it. And I think it's worth mentioning too, is we're not all going to be great at everything. There are just things that no matter how hard I work, I'm not going to be awesome at them.
Right.
Because, I think that really being gifted or being good at something is a combination of talent and developed skill. And sometimes there's just not enough raw talent to work with to be excellent in a particular area. Athletics is that way for me. No matter how hard I work, I'm not going to play in the NBA. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But I bring that up because there have been some great examples of people who take scientific work and turn it into great communication. And I think Daniel Pink, the author, is an example of this. That, as far as I know, and it's possible I'm wrong about this, but I don't think Dan Pink does a lot of his own research. He works and builds on the research of others to write great books like Drive and the ideas that he has spread has been, here's this great research. Now let me help the world understand what it means and what we can do with it. So I think for a scientist or someone who has that kind of challenge, certainly I don't ever want to discount the value of developing your own communication skills, but another option could be to partner with someone, find a great communicator who can get passionate about your work and work together, collaborate to get that message out there.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is identifying and recognizing your own strengths and your weaknesses as well. And then, and I'm a big fan of different, personality assessments and things. Did one with you a while back. Where you can find and tap into your strengths, but also recognizing that, depending on your leadership styles or your business styles, you can team up with someone who has a contrasting strengths that will work, because then you become like the chocolate and peanut butter together. And now you're like, oh my gosh, chocolate and peanut butter. So yeah, interesting. And talk a little bit about humbly confident. You wrote in your book about being humbly confident. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. Yeah. I'll start with the opposite of that, which is what I call proud insecurity. And this is something that I have experienced in my life where I have an inward insecurity and that imposter syndrome is really kicking in, and I compensate for it by being really arrogant on the outside. And I'm trying to project strength. So I'm, acting really, really confident, but it's really a mask for an internal fear and insecurity. And living in that mode is really dangerous and risky and perilous. And quite frankly, it's just a lot of work to manufacture confidence when you don't have it, and to try to to manage an image of confidence is difficult. But at the other end of the spectrum is humble confidence. And that is where you are confident in your abilities. You're confident in not necessarily that you know everything or you have all the answers, but that you are good enough at figuring it out. That if I don't know the answer to this, I can find someone who does. I can do the research. I can work my network. I can reach out to Dave Delaney if I need expertise on podcasting or on building communities or on public speaking, because he's going to have answers that I don't. And so I feel confident and comfortable that if I don't know something, I can learn it. And that allows me to not have to project an outward false confidence, that I can remain humble, that I can say, I don't have all the answers, and I don't have to have all the answers. And anyone who expects me to have all the answers has an unrealistic expectation. So I don't need to try to measure up to that ideal that I'm an expert at everything, or that I, in any given situation will make the right choice. I won't. I'll make mistakes. I'll experiment. I'll try and fail and learn and try again. And eventually I will succeed. And I think that's the real difference, is that the humility can come more easily when you recognize that learning and growing and having success is a process that involves a lot of failure along the way. And so I can simultaneously have enough humility to say, yeah, I may get it wrong and I may mess up from time to time, but that's okay, while having the confidence that eventually I will figure it out. I will get there. And if I keep at it, I can learn and achieve and accomplish whatever I've set my mind to, if I'm willing to go through the process of trial and error and experimentation and learning that it takes to get there. So that's that combination of humble confidence, that I don't have to hold myself up as the expert or the end all be all, but I do believe that I can get to whatever end that I set my mind to get to through that process.
And how do you determine, because it sounds to me like what you're saying is you need to at some point determine what you need to succeed at in order to succeed in your business. So if you are a leader of an organization, you've got goals that you need to reach in order to see success. And I think you need to maybe take a step back in order to define what success even is and what those metrics are, to know that you're moving in the right direction. So for example, using that plane analogy again, you've realized at some point probably that, it doesn't matter. You don't need to be stepping into the cockpit and attempting to fly a plane, because flying a plane is not part of what you do for a living. It's not part of your business. It's not part of your life. But on the flip side, you talked about the power and the importance of good communication skills. And so presenting your ideas and having experience, as you said, a little bit of acting and some radio and things like that, and presenting as well, but realizing that presentation skills are such an important part of your core business that you chose to hire professionals and go and actually really study the art of performance. So maybe the question here is, how can you better define what success is, or what those goals are, in order to make sure that you are, you're not failing at flying a plane when that's not something you need to be doing.
Yeah. I think it starts with the recognition that all success comes at a cost, and that success requires sacrifice. And the reason I say it starts with that is because in order to say yes to one thing, you have to say no to many, many other things. You simply can't do it all. And so when you recognize that, you start to become intentional about what things am I going to say yes to, and what things am I going to intentionally say no to in order to make those things a reality that I want to say yes to. So again, going back to some of the other things we've touched on, if I want to be a good public speaker, I'm going to have to devote time and energy to honing that craft, to developing, to improving, to seeking feedback, to rehearsing and flexing that muscle. If I want to be a great basketball player, I'm going to have to spend time practicing and doing drills and honing those skills and building the muscle memory there. But looking at my natural talent, I think I have a lot better shot of being good at being a public speaker than I do at being a basketball player. And so I've intentionally decided that there's one thing I'm going to pursue and there's another thing I'm just not going to pursue. And even if I enjoy playing basketball, and I do enjoy bouncing a ball around and shooting hoops every now and then, but I'm not going to invest time, money, and energy into getting better at that because it's not in line with the things that I'm trying to achieve personally and professionally. And it's a trade-off. There are a lot of things. You mentioned flying a plane. I've wanted to be a pilot for a lot of my years, and in fact, in my younger years, I flew experimental aircraft. I've flown ultralights and done some things in that vein. But I had to make a decision at some point that that's not high enough on my priority list to invest the time and money it would take to become a licensed pilot and to be really good at that. And does that mean I'll never do it? No. It doesn't. I may yet get there. I would love to, but it is not, I'm not going to let it compete with the things that are really, really important to me, like raising a family, being faithful in my church, building a business, impacting people, having the kind of influence I want to have, writing a book. Dave, writing a book is a big commitment that you've got to decide, are you going to set aside the time and put in the work to make that a reality? And so I think you really have to know what your goals are, what the end game, what you're trying to achieve. If you, if you follow, there's saying, if you chase two rabbits, you catch neither of them, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to go after something, you've got to let some other things go. And sometimes those are really good things. There's nothing wrong with them, but you have to make intentional decisions about what you're going to pursue. And then when you achieve something, or when you get to the point that you can do something without it taking a lot of time, a lot of practice, you can go back to that well of what are the other ideas? What are the things I put on hold? Which one of those can I pull out and start to spend some time on? But the reality is we all have only 24 hours a day, only 365 days a year. You just can't manufacture more time and energy to apply to more things than you can handle at once.
Yeah, good point. Great point. Because there's just so much time in a day, and that's it. All right, so let's move on to the lightning round.
All right.
So finish this sentence. Nice guys and gals finish.
Happy.
What is a nice book you recommend to the nice makers listening?
A nice book is Patrick Lencioni's Getting Naked. And it's a great book, particularly for anybody in a professional services business. If you're in any kind of consulting or coaching or, a service-oriented company, it's absolutely invaluable. But even for other people in other types of businesses, I think it provides some really, really great concepts on how to build and maintain great clients and build trust with those clients.
Oh, that's great. And how is Kris nice to himself?
How is Kris nice to himself? I have a jar of dark chocolate peanut M&Ms sitting right here on my desk. And every day I eat 2 or 3 of those. And it's just a little thing, I eat relatively healthy overall. I don't consume a ton of junk food, but that's my little treat that I give myself every now and then.
So you were nodding in agreement when I talked about chocolate and peanut butter then?
Yes, chocolate and peanut butter are good things. Dark chocolate especially.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. All right. And if you had a billboard, what would it say?
Oh man. If I had a billboard, I think I would want it to be a digital one because I would probably change what it says on a fairly regular basis. I like to mix it up, and sometimes it would be funny. Sometimes it would be really thought-provoking, and other times it would be really poignant and challenging.
What would it say today? What would it say today if I was driving past?
If you were driving past today, it would... boy, that's a really great question. You're probably gonna have to edit this because I'm gonna sit here and think for a minute.
That's okay.
It would say, it's probably time to cut your yard, because that's what I'm thinking about as I'm looking out the windows right now. My grass is getting really tall and it's taunting me.
That sounds familiar, actually. Thanks for putting that billboard up. Now, not only do I remember what I need to do, but now I will be nagged about it as well.
Now you feel guilty as well. So right. Hey, I'm providing a little nice guilt to your life.
Perfect. Kris, thank you so much for your time today. How can people find out more about you and reach out?
Yeah, my website is kriskelso.com, and it's Kris with a K, KrisKelso. And in fact, if you remember that my name starts with a K, I'm pretty easy to find on most social channels and online, things like that. So kriskelso.com, and the book website is overcomingtheimpostor.com. And you can read there about the book, my speech, and some of the events that I've been at, as well as you can find information about my executive coaching and leadership development work that I do.
Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. Theme music provided by Alistair Crystal at alistaircrystal.ca. Hey, if you enjoyed the conversation, please take a moment to leave us a review. The links are in the description. I'll have more of that soon. Did you know that new subscribers of the Nice Maker email newsletter receive a free copy of my little ebook, Improve with Improv? Each Friday, I share nice stories, tools, tips, and much more, and you can grab it now from nicemaker.co or by clicking the link in the episode description. I'm Dave Delaney. Take care and be nice.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Ian Truscott hosts a great podcast called Rockstar CMO. Ian, tell us what these fine folks will get when they listen.
Well, Jason, I'm no rock star, but I've picked up a thing or two over the last 20 years on my tour from sysadmin to CMO, and each week I chat with the true rock stars, my fabulous guests and chums, and share what we call marketing street knowledge to inspire our listeners in a rock star.
Amazing. Where can people subscribe?
Go to rockstarcmo.com, find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or search for Rockstar CMO FM wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard him. Go subscribe.